And I'm going to introduce a friend of mine that kind of proud to know. Sala Udin returned to his native Pittsburgh after 4 years as a freedom rider in the Mississippi Delta to apply his community organizing skills learned in the Southern Rights Movement. He was raised in the Hill District, and one of the things he had set about doing was founding the House of the Crossroad, the first comprehensive drug treatment center in the state of Pennsylvania. He was executive director of the center for 13 years. The influence of Amiri Baraka's Black Arts Movement and the Newark Spirit House movers had a profound effect on the young Black power advocates of those times. Poetry became a vital component in community mobilization and became even more potent as the addition of music and drama led to the establishment of the Pittsburgh Black Horizons Theatre under the direction of Sala's childhood friends Rob Penny and August Wilson. Sala Udin played the lead role in almost all of the Black Horizon Theater plays by Baraka, Ed Bullens, and other Black playwrights. August asked Sala to play the lead role of Becker, the jitney station owner, in his first professionally staged play. Jitney was performed professionally for the first time in 1982. Sala Udin has since played in most of August's plays in the Pittsburgh and San Francisco area. Sala also had a radio show in Pittsburgh. It was called Serve the People. He also had a newspaper column at the same time. When Sala left to go to California in his collaborations with August Wilson, some folks are kind of glad to see him leave the city because he was on people's cases so hard. People regard Sala as that kind of a warrior. Sala has ran the successful election campaigns of Margaret Malines for the seat on the school board, and then when Margaret tragically died, he ran her husband, Jake Malines, in a bid for her to replace her in the seat, and later his run for city council. When Jake died in office in 1993, Sala felt the obligation to keep up the work they had done and the progress that the community had made. Sala's political and community activism eventually led to his election to the Pittsburgh City Council, where he served for 11 years. Mr. Udin used his position in the City Council to help establish Pittsburgh's first Black Cultural Center, recently named the August Wilson Center for African American Culture. This $37 million center is scheduled to open in late 2008. Currently, Sala Udin is president and CEO of the Coro Center for Civic Leadership in Pittsburgh. One more thing. This political observer in Pittsburgh who has said that publicly has said that Sala has done more for the community he came from than anybody has ever done for that city. Sala Udin.
Thank you. I want to thank Reg Gibbons and Ed Roberson for convening this conversation. I think it's the beginning of a very important conversation that's going to spread across the country and answer the question that Carolyn posed about what's next. I also want to acknowledge my wife, Jackie. She's here. We're celebrating our 3rd wedding anniversary today. Oh. It's always good to be back in Chicago, the land of giants. And I'm especially honored to be here with Angela Jackson and Carolyn Rodgers. And Sterling, you all are people who I have looked up to for many, many years. And there are a lot of people like me who look up to you through your writings and through your work. A lot of would-be poets. There are a lot of us who, at least you took your stuff out of the closet. There's a lot of us who never took anything out of the closet, but always wanted to be a poet, because Poets are so cool. We're here storytelling. You'll have to forgive the autobiographical nature of this presentation, but the only way you can see my perspective of the Black arts movement and the Black liberation movement is through my eyes and through my journey, so you'll forgive that. And Henry Louis Gates killed the Black arts movement, I guess. I guess he pronounced it dead. I thought it was still going on. I'm alive, and Carolyn's alive, and Sterling's alive, and Angela's alive, and our work is still going on. So I did not know that the Black arts movement was dead. That's good to know. For me, my beginning in the Black liberation movement started when I was about 20 years old, and I was the head of the NAACP Youth Council, and we took a group to Washington, D.C. to participate in the March on Washington, and to hear Dr. King deliver the speech that was done before many of the people in this room were even born. How many people here were in Washington in 1963 at that time, at that march? That's amazing. I'm getting old. Fewer and fewer hands go up every time I ask that question. But that was my beginning. I had been living in New York, and our ritual for Saturday morning was to go play basketball and then go shower and then go find Malcolm. You never knew what corner Malcolm was going to be speaking on. He probably didn't know. He would just ride around and just decide, all right, this is it, and get out and set up the truck and get on top of the back of the pickup truck and start speaking. So you had to drive around Harlem to find out where Malcolm was. But we loved listening to Malcolm. And so it was natural that just a couple years after the March on Washington and the heat that was coming up from the South, from Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi, and the struggles that were going on there. And I should also add that there was a large contingent of students from Northwestern University who came to the South. Some of you who are students now and interested in the civil rights movement should look up the students who came from this university and volunteered in the South and got beaten in the South and arrested. I do know that there was a large contingent from Northwestern who came down to the South at that time. I had the good fortune of being sent to the Delta of Mississippi, Holmes County, close to where Angela, I believe, is from, Greenville. And we worked a lot in Greenwood and Greenville and Chula and all over the Mississippi Delta, part of SNCC, under the leadership of Fannie Lou Hamer and under the frequent tutelage of Dr. Martin Luther King, who came through oftentimes to hold workshops for the and orientation for the Civil Rights Week workers, to review our work and to tell us about other projects that were going on. Around that time, around 1965, that was the time when Leroy Jones left Greenwich Village and went to Harlem to organize the Black Repertory Theater there in Harlem. I can't say that we in the South were very much attuned to Black arts movement beyond just the photography that we saw of the Black arts movement, the Black liberation movement, the civil rights movement as it was called. I would guess, though, that the photographers of the time considered themselves more journalists and photojournalists than artists, but that was as close to Black art as we had witnessed at that time. That was also around the time when Malcolm, who had become Haj Malik Shabazz, had been assassinated. all that was going on around the time that I went to Mississippi as a freedom rider. They told me it was going to be for 4 months. I was there for 4 years. Shortly after I arrived, the Black Power debate heated up. And SNCC broke from the leadership of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and began its debate. It was first a quiet internal debate, and it was a debate then that grew louder and louder. And then when Stokely became chairman of SNCC, he used that forum to publicly advance Black Power against the theory of nonviolent civil disobedience and integration. And so the debate became louder and louder and bigger and bigger. And eventually, the SNCC, we began to send white students back home. And we stopped recruiting white students to come to participate in the civil rights movement. It was becoming a Black Power movement. And that conflict between black civil rights workers and white civil rights workers was an extremely devastating conflict for many people who, both black and white, who considered themselves all soldiers in this war, and a lot of whites who had made tremendous sacrifices found themselves now being ejected from the civil rights movement. A couple years later, the Black arts movement and the Black liberation struggle begin to join formally when Baraka comes back from New York to Newark, New Jersey, which is his home, and actually begins to participate in the political movement to get Ken Gibson elected the mayor of Newark. He would have been one of the earliest of the black mayors elected to a major urban area. That coming together of the Black arts movement and the Black political movement is an important moment, I think, in the history of both the Black arts movement and the Black liberation movement. Another important milestone occurred just a couple years later when Dr. King was assassinated. Although there was heated debates among Stokely and Malcolm and Dr. King and others, when Dr. King got assassinated, that put an end to the debate of integration versus Black Power, and Black Power won the debate by default. Urban centers across the country were set ablaze. There were not many cities that did not have a major insurrection or riot. As a matter of fact, if you would be in one city and people from another city would come, we'd be asking each other, did you have your riot yet? Y'all haven't had a riot yet? If you didn't have a riot yet, you was really country. The Committee for a Unified Newark began to attract people from around the country. And because Baraka was seen as such a national leader in the Black arts movement, a lot of people who, when they came to the East Coast, flocked to Newark and saw the theatrical productions that was put on by Baraka. Sometimes he would do the plays that he had written. Other times he would do theatricalized poetry readings, and the Spirit House Movers, which was the name of the theater group that he had formed, became very influential in getting young, budding poets who were visiting to go back home, and it encouraged them to continue their poetry, to continue writing, to have these workshops where we criticized each other's work, etc. And so it tended to spread the Black arts movement out across the country. At that time also, there were a series of Black Power conferences that were being held at different places around the country. They were held in Chicago, they were in Philadelphia, and the Black nationalist movement at the time was pretty scattered and pretty locally based. And there was a complaint among the movement activists that there was nothing holding us together in between conferences, in between these Black Power conferences. And so the consensus started to build that we needed a national organization that was able to put us to work every day on the Black Power agenda and not just once a year whenever we came to conferences. And that coming together of all of those activists, they came together in Atlanta in 1970 and formed a Congress called the Congress of African People. And it was that first national organizing of the Congress of African People that created a formal national organization, a political organization that was composed not just of artists from the Black arts movement, but also other political activists who were not necessarily artists. In Pittsburgh, some of the poets who came back to Pittsburgh influenced by the Spirit House Movers and Baraka, they formed a group called the Center Avenue Poets, or the Poets in the Center Avenue tradition. Center Avenue is the main Black commercial avenue in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. That included Rob Penny, August Wilson, Charlie Williams, and Nick Flanoy. August Wilson and Rob Penny and myself, we had been schoolmates in the Black Catholic school system in Pittsburgh, and so we knew each other from childhood. The plays, we also put together it was a political group that we put together. This is around 68, between 68, leading up to the Congress of African People in 70. We had an Off the Pusher campaign because drugs was starting to permeate the Black community. We always had drugs in our community, but the drugs was primarily among like the gangsters and the pimps and the musicians and the hipsters. Those were the only ones in the community that were really doing drugs. But it wasn't something that was common throughout the whole community until 68. And we started this Off the Pusher campaign. I can't tell you some of the things that we did in that campaign. But the pushers then started to off us. And so we stopped that campaign and ended up with a drug treatment program that was a much safer response to drugs being permeated in our community. We also had a strategy for Black studies at the University of Pittsburgh. There was a demand for more Black students and a Black studies program, and the Black Action Society was created, and the Black Studies Department was created there at the university. And we also had a theatrical institute that we built called the Black Horizons Theatre. And it was in that theater that we staged the plays of Baraka and White and Bullens and Milner and Woody King and all of the Black playwrights that were producing Black plays at this time. And we always incorporated poetry into our political meetings as well. Poetry and drums and dance, African dance. And it was that movement, that political movement and that cultural movement that spread African culture and the beauty of being black and the beauty of being African throughout the entire community. The Congress of African People had chapters in most major cities across the country, including Chicago. But of course in Chicago always had an independent point of view about everything. They didn't just lay down and follow anybody. And it was always a large chapter of the Panthers here in Chicago, and the presence of other giants whose names have already been mentioned. And there was some tension also, talk about alliances, there was some tension when Amiri Baraka connected with another major cultural nationalist from the West Coast, whose name was Maulana Karenga. And Amiri Baraka and Maulana Karenga joined forces, and the Karenga, although Baraka had worked out a kind of a political structure, Karenga had worked out a ideological structure called Kawaida. And so the theory of Kawaida and the political structure of the Congress of African People came together in a major alliance and spread stuff like Kwanzaa and dashiki wearing and more poetry writing and more playwriting. And those movements also influenced the popular culture, like James Brown, I'm Black and I'm Proud, and Marvin Gaye, you know, What's Going On, Ain't No Stopping Us Now, and the Philadelphia, the Motown sound and the Philadelphia sound. All of that movement of progressive lyrics in the popular culture was influenced by the Black arts movement as well. So theater groups and Black museums and cultural arts flourished throughout the country, either independently or through organized efforts like the Congress of African People. And Kalamu Assalam talked about the twin sister relationship between the Black arts movement and the Black liberation movement. But the Black arts were the leaders in that relationship. The Black artists were always, they were like the flamethrowers. They were the fiery ones. They were the most militant ones. It was the Black artists that gave definition and description to what it is that we were fighting for. Eventually, as we got more involved with the African Liberation Support Committee, some of you remember those movements, and involved in Africa itself. Anybody here go on the 6th Pan-African Congress to Tanzania? We had a large contingent of African Americans to go to Tanzania when the 6th Pan-African Congress was convened there. And we went there, you know, after these debates about we are African people, we went to Tanzania as Africans, and we were welcomed there as Americans. Welcome, Americans. We're not Americans, we're Africans. Welcome, Americans. It was heartbreaking. But then when I looked at some of the behavior of some of us, then I could understand them calling us Americans, because we had lost a lot of whatever it was that made us African, because we were acting very American. We were very impatient about the luggage coming off the thing. We were very impatient about the cabs. We were very impatient. We had money to spend. We were loud and all over the place. And I said, well, damn, we are American. That was a big disappointment. Our involvement with Africa and Africa's African socialism, and especially the influence of Nyerere and other African leaders like that, got us to looking to critiquing our own nationalist view and developing a larger world view. And we began to look at African socialism and evolved from African socialism to straight out socialism to eventually Marxism-Leninism. And by 74 or 75, a lot of the art that you will see coming out of the Congress of African People and out of Baraka, you will find with that influence of socialism, and even to the point of changing the name from the Congress of African People to the Revolutionary Communist League, and some of the poetry that Baraka was dropping at the time, like Dictatorship of the Proletariat, and other poetry like that. Around that time also, we had, we're almost done with the Black Horizons Theater because the theater was funded out of our own pockets. There were no cultural arts, National Endowment of the Arts grants coming that early. And so we funded the theater, and we were the ones who did everything. The actors did the set building and did the costume making and did everything. Everybody did everything, and we operated out of our own pockets. So by the time the University of Pittsburgh, the Black Studies Department was ready to form a black theater, we were very, very happy that we could now let the Black Horizons Theater die, because the theater movement would continue on with the Kuntu Repertory Theater, which continues to this day. And we were able to let the Black Horizons Theater go, but we put on a lot of great plays at the Black Horizons Theater, and August Wilson developed his craft at the August Wilson Theater and then took it on the road and tested it out in some of the black theater competitions that were being held at Yale University and other places, and got to see how good his work really was. So we were very, very proud that August was our homeboy, and he came back to Pittsburgh often, bringing us stories of his conquests in the theatrical world. And then when he was ready to stage a major production of his work in Pittsburgh, obviously Pittsburgh is where he came back to, and I was fortunate enough to be asked by him to do Becker. In fact, we wrote that play together next to a jitney station. Y'all know about jitneys in Chicago? Well, there's a jitney station right next to this restaurant in Pittsburgh. The restaurant was owned by two ornery brothers. They were so ornery. What you want? They were just absolutely, but they cooked the best fish you ever tasted. That black bass they cooked was unbelievable. They were too ornery to put a name on the restaurant. They just had a sign in the window that said pan-fried fish. So whenever we decided we were going to meet, let's meet at pan-fried fish. We gave it a name. But whenever we would get there, if we said we were going to meet at 2 o'clock, August would already have been there. And he would be next door in the jitney station, sitting on the floor, laughing and writing, while the jitney drivers was playing checkers and telling lies about their women and their kids and their jobs. And August just loved hanging out in that jitney station. So it was no surprise to us when August said the first play that he was going to produce was called Jitney. And it was wonderful. I had a great time playing in it. And I played in most of his plays. August is just I'm still talking about him like he's still here. He was a wonderful, wonderful writer. Eventually, we talk about what happens to the people who were involved in the Black Arts Movement from way back in the 60s up till today. And for people who think that the Black Arts Movement is dead, I hate to break it to you, but there are a lot of people who are still producing based upon the skills and inspiration that they picked up in the Black Arts Movement of the 60s and the 70s. There are people all over the world. I was talking to a brother who said that there was one brother, Chelu from Detroit. He was in the Congress of African People in Detroit, a young kid at the time, eventually went on to MIT, and now he's running the World Bank Department in Angola and in Mozambique. And he always talks about and thinks about the training and the skill development that he got from the movement and has used that movement. He said, I use MIT just for my credentials, but my skills I got from the movement. And there are a lot of people like that all over the planet. Some are in public office, either in local or state or national office. Some are in professional jobs in the private sector. Others are teaching school. Many are in Black Studies programs. But the people who were involved at that time and who, like Carolyn said, I know I've been changed. Once you've been changed, you can't do anything else. You can't do anything else. No matter where your job is, that's what you're going to do. You're going to find some kind of way to represent and represent the right way. So I think, well, one of the things that we don't have now, we don't have that national organization that brings us all together in a single political agenda. Nor do we have a national Black arts organization or the journals that we need to promote our poetry, to promote our theater writing, to promote our art. I think that this conversation that we're having right now will be seen 10 years from now as the beginning of the coming together of another movement to advance both the Black Arts Movement and the Black Liberation Movement, because that work is still not done. Thank you, Ed and Lila.